Hey, greetings everybody. This is Wesley Pepper. This is the Art Lexcia podcast. This is episode 87, and I'm with my sister.
This is Nkosi. So great to be with you guys again. Yeah.
Great to see everybody. Just quickly on a shout out. Thanks to all the likes, comments, and love we're getting from everybody from all over the world. Thanks, guys. Like it's really appreciated. Thanks to all the likes on our Facebook page. It's actually growing. Actually, it's actually growing pretty nicely, pretty organically. There's some interesting names in there. Thanks everybody for tuning in, man, and also to our last week's guest, Candace Harris, dope as episode. As you remember, we got messed up with load shedding in the end. It got a bit dark, but yeah, we just ran with it. I think it came out very well. So thanks, Candace, for coming through too, man. Remember, guys, yeah, man, we're all on social media pages, so check us out. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment to these episodes. Yeah, man, and we'll show you the love back. And who knows, maybe in the future we'll feature you on this platform. Just one more thingy before Siza brings into our guest. We got a really cool guest today. Really looking forward to it. We're gonna talk poetry. So we've been doing 2 episodes of poetry, and it's not like I've been counting, but yeah, it's just 2 weeks, and we're gonna mix it up. Also, we're lining up some really interesting stuff, man. Real cool events coming up. Actually, I wanted to name drop something, but I just realized I want to say that for next week. And remember, just in closing, remember our email address is theartlexia.podcast@gmail.com. Drop us an email there. Drop us an email there if you, yeah, if you want to reach out.
Yeah.
I stopped giving out my email address for obvious reasons. It gets creepy. So we have, so Caesar, you've been doing well, and you'll introduce our guest today.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I welcome my brother Raphael, the Abdon. And I just want to start this on a very peaceful note and say, just like the previous episode, I have your copy. It's a signed
Okay, we'll talk about it, but thank you, Siza.
I still have your copy. It's signed, I've come to take you home by Diana Ferris. So I so much love to you, brother. And it's so good to be with you here. I mean, we have so much respect for you. Uput Raphael is actually in the academic space. He's a doctor. He did his PhD in linguistics and literature studies, right? I think it was in Udine in Italy, and work in academia at UNISA currently.
Oh, wow.
And I mean,
not anymore, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, we've been following your work and so much to talk about. So welcome, my brother, and thank you for making time today to join us to talk about your work.
Thank
so
you,
if you can just like introduce yourself and then, yeah, and properly do that by reading us a poem, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Siza, and thank you, Wesley, for having me. It's really a pleasure to be with you guys because you guys have been with me in this journey from the beginning. Because yes, I am, in an academic space. I'm not at UNISA anymore, actually since 2018.
Okay.
So I'm still obviously doing research. I joined the HSRC, the Human Sciences Research Council, as an associate researcher. My 9-to-5 job though is a teacher. I teach, in an international school in Pretoria. Teach literature, of course, history as well. So things that are dear to me. And as you say, my background obviously is from literature. Okay, and on top of that, I'm a poet. And that's why I'm saying it's great to be with you, because I started this journey when I moved here in South Africa in 2008. Wow. And you guys were some of the guys that were already there, pushing it and doing great things. And I've been inspired by guys like you. That's how I started writing poetry. So you remember the times of Oro Cafe and
Yeah,
whatever
man.
followed.
Good days. Shara Bookstore in Utah.
Exactly.
good
That
memories.
I
that's
remember.
what fueled really my passion for poetry, and I would ever be will always be grateful to you
Yeah.
guys for
And
creating that space for us.
Raphael, we actually worked on a haiku together. I want to revisit. I want to revisit it and see how, like maybe we should put it out there. But
Yes,
I mean, we're very humbled to have you here today as well.
thank
So
you.
if you don't mind, can you kick us off with a poem? I mean, we're interested in your work.
Yes, so I've interestingly, I have brought some haiku, but this wasn't prepared, right, at all. So it's interesting that you mentioned the haiku that we did together long ago. I'm not gonna start with the haiku though. Maybe I'm gonna read them later, because they are part of a project that I'm working at the moment, working at the moment. But I will start with a new poem that is going to be published soon in an academic journal. Something kind of unusual for me. I don't really like I use those spaces for poetry. I publish articles there, but this one is going to appear in a journal called Shakespeare in Southern Africa, which is also something outside my comfort zone. But maybe I'll read the poem first, and then maybe we can talk about the story behind it and how he ended up in this journal dedicated to Shakespeare. The poem is called Shakespeare Didn't Work for Me. Until I hit my 30s. Too many unschooled teachers telling me how damn good he was, and too many insipid Hollywood versions of his stuff. I found the sonnets honeyed, and to be or not to be, that is the question, the wakest line ever. I still do. Reading him was like strolling in a fog-wrapped sunflower field. And it took an Italian buffoon to pull the bard's soul out of the page and unlock the magic. His grunts and ululations, his screams and contortions blew the fog away. And the mad kings, the cunning queens, the wise fools, the blind earls, the smart witches, the horny heiresses, the doomed lovers, the insolent monsters, the airy spirits, and the vengeful ghosts popped up one by one, tap dancing on the sunflowers. Now I'm in my late 40s and it works just fine. I even like the sonnets.
Oh,
I enjoyed that, man.
So okay, how I ended up writing about Shakespeare and my late discovery of Shakespeare, because first of all, I think it is a common experience, unfortunately, I would say, to not like Shakespeare, because it is, in my view, imposed on students not in the right spaces and at the right time. I mean, we're not gonna go into the details of how poetry is taught in this country and elsewhere, but that is at least my experience. That when you approach Shakespeare at school, unless you have a fantastic teacher, it is really hard, for a young student to grasp, the depth of his writing and all the nuances of the languages, etc. So that's why I said, I it didn't kick in for me until I was 30. And that's the story the story that I tell in the poem is that only via this Italian actor, whose name is Carmelo Bene, is only via him that I started to appreciate Shakespeare. And then, I started reading his stuff, and, now I love him. I'm under no circumstances an expert on Shakespeare, but I've read, his most important works and learned a lot from it as a writer, as a poet. And I ended up writing an article for this journal, which will be published soon, thanks to actually Professor Chris Truman of Wits, who is a very open-minded and cutting-edge scholar. He invited me to give a seminar on this Italian actor, Carmelo Bene, and his engagement which he did last year for him and his students. And, then from there came the article and the poem. So that's one of the projects that I'm busy working at now. This article that is gonna come out soon. As you know, with academic articles, I'm busy revising it after you get the feedback, etc., etc. And so, as the conclusions of this article is the poem, which is something that I actually do. I always infuse my academic papers with poetry. And maybe we can talk about that also as well, the engagement between these two words that are often incommunicado, but there are ways of breaking that not incommunicado and miscommunication.
No, absolutely. And I mean, Raphael, I can totally relate to Shakespeare and what you meant. And you are right, if you don't get a correct teacher for that, it's a nightmare. But how do you feel about that, honestly? Because I mean, I find that it's easier to teach from a point where I can relate.
Exactly.
So when I teach anything, any literature, it will be South African first.
Exactly.
And then later we learn all the forms, because it's important to, to see what's been done and stuff. How do you feel about that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, as you know, part of my job as an educator as well is to find new ways. And I've been, part of a working team actually who has been working on this. Is ZAP, the South African Poetry Project. And we've been busy for 10 years now, elaborating and creating new ways of teaching poetry in schools, so that we teach poetry in a way that is engaging, that is relatable for the students, that is situated, in South Africa, and so on and so on. And so obviously, as you say, I fully agree. I mean, for a young student to be able to fuel his or her passion for poetry, or even to bring to the classroom the passion that they have outside of it, because a lot of students do engage with poetry outside the classroom, right? Then why should they come to the classroom and see poetry as something arid, delinked to their experience? So we've been working on this and many other aspects, so that finally poetry can be taught in a way that can empower children, rather than putting them in a situation where they find themselves uncomfortable or simply disconnected. That's why I'm saying, to my experience, well, Shakespeare is a great author to study, but at some point of your trajectory as a reader or as a student also, but yeah, it's a big issue. But that's, I agree with you in the sense that let's first expose the students to poetry that is close to them in terms of era, in terms of the area, the genealogy, and all this element that made the language, of course, obviously. And so all the things that can create this connection between the learner and poetry. And then, later on, they can explore Ezra Pound and Eliot and Shakespeare and whoever they want.
Yeah. So, and then, I don't know, Wes, just before you come in there, I'm interested in, do you write in Italian? Talking of language. Your mother
question, how many, when you also just a follow-up question on that, when you say you teach poetry, do you teach is your medium English, or is there any other African language?
No, obviously I teach. Plus I work in a Cambridge school, so I don't know if you are familiar, but we have a Cambridge curriculum which is very British center. Even though I do teach, poets like I teach Jackie Kay, who's a Afro-Scottish poet, and I've taught in Googie in the past. So there are gaps or cracks in the curriculum that you can, work with and work in actually, and enlarge the spectrum of possibility for students. But obviously it's, there's a lot of, British literature in it. So obviously I teach poetry in English, and mostly from the British world. But also to go back to your question, Siza, I do write in Italian, but I write academically in Italian. I write short stories in Italian. I don't write poetry in Italian. I tried, and it was so bad, and that I stopped immediately. Because as I was saying to you, I mean, I started writing here, so I consider myself a South African poet, 100%. I'm not an Italian poet at all. I'm an Italian, you know, living in South Africa, but a South African poet, 100%. I only write in English. I only write in English, and with a South African, you know, background as a poet.
Background and culture for sure. But do you translate from English to Italian? Because I know I'm struggling with that. In particular, like when I write in my mother tongue to translate to English, oh my gosh. I feel like with enough, and
so I'm not the only one who have that love and hate relationship with my mother tongue. Okay, so this book is my latest book. Okay,
yes, I wanted to talk about that. Yes.
So it is selected poem and then Poesie Scelte, which is basically a bilingual book, right? In Italian and English. So it's a selected poems of my first 10 years as a poet, with a front page translation in Italian, but I didn't do the translation. It's the translation was made by an Italian poet, because to be honest, for me, it is already, you know, a big effort to be able to create something in English, to be able to write poetry in English. And as you know, as a translator, you know, that's a different work. You know, you have to not only be able to use the language, but you actually have to recreate a poem. And I don't think it is my task to rewrite my own poems in Italian. So I mean, my poems have been translated in Italian before, so I let other Italian poets do it. And even in this case, the translator is called Lorenzo Mari, is a friend of mine and a great Italian poet. So he did the translation. I never translate my poetry. I'm not interested in it, to be honest. And you know, it's not my job. It's the job of the Italian poets if they are interested in exploring my South African poetry.
Raphael, just for the listeners, can you just give us the title of your book again? And can you just show
it's called Selected Poems, Poesie Scelte in Italian, 2010-2020. And it's unfortunately, obviously, you know, for logistical reasons, it's not available in South African bookstores because it was published for the Italian market. It is a book that is presenting me to the Italian readership. Okay. It's obviously available on every online platform if people want to order it. But you know how it works. For poetry books, there's no point in having an international distributor when you know what the sales are here. So if people want to buy it, they can find it on Amazon and all the other online platforms. Yeah.
Okay. And like Rafi, as a South African poet, like who did you read? I know you did this beautiful tribute for Abdon Matera on the PKO magazine, but who else do you read? Like, you know, just with the poetry itself, who style or voice do you feel more?
Well, I mean, my approach to literature in general is to be as random as possible in my selection, geographically, in terms of the eras, in terms of the style, in terms of the genre. So if we narrow it down to South African poetry, and I use the same approach, I read everything. I read the white old academic poet, and I read the young slammer, and I read, you know, the black, you know, poet with a different background. So I try to explore everything because that helps me as a writer. Because as a writer, my approach to writing is I don't want to write like any one of them. I want to find something that is different, that doesn't belong to any of these spaces, which is somehow risky because you run the risk of being excluded by all these spaces. But it's rewarding when, you know, your poetry is acknowledged and it doesn't really fit into any of these boxes. I don't know if that makes sense. So, you know, if you ask me who are my favorite South African poets, there are many, but if I have to look at 3 different generations, I would say Domatera and Brawili from the old one, Philippa, and perhaps, well, Maisha definitely. And then among the young poets, I would say Busi Mahlangu, Jelem Simang. Yeah, if I have to choose 3 from 3 different generations, I would mention these names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, go on, Wes.
For the listeners, man, can you take us through your processes? How do you go about writing a poem? So just take us through how your process, man, and like sort of what, because you're an academic, what triggers or what inspires you to write? How does Raphael take you today on the write poetry? Yeah, just take us through your headspace and that type of and your process.
Yeah. So what inspires me, what fuels my writing is reading. So I read as much as possible. I explore a certain writer for a certain period or a certain journal, for instance, for a certain period. And I see what are the common themes and what are the type of forms and dictions that, you know, pop up from that particular space. And as I said, I do that so that I will not replicate it. And I will create a synthesis of different influences. Right. So, and in terms of like technique, I don't have like a particular one. I write every day, I edit a lot. And what a poem has to do for me to be considered sort of ready to be, you know, shared, either in a journal or on a stage, it has to sound musical to me. It has to treat a certain subject matter that hasn't really been treated before in this context, or to treat it from a new perspective. And my rule number 1 is, for what distinguishes poetry from prose is the economy of language. So it has to be the language has to be stripped to the bone. That's why I spent even more time editing than writing. The writing, you know, you can scribble a few notes in 5 minutes, but to get a poem out of, you know, random notes, that takes perhaps, you know, sometimes even years. So my process is quite rigorous in the sense that I have these different steps, okay? I find the inspiration from different sources. I write something that I think can possibly work, and then I have to edit it. And, you know, hopefully at the end of this long process, something good might come out. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I love everything you're saying. I mean, I know the culture of reading in South Africa. I mean, it's an exciting time, I think, in the literature space. There's so much work coming from South Africa. And I hope that, you know, the younger generation knows that it's important to read, and there is context, you know, outside Shakespeare to read, because South African writers are really just doing the pots like yourself, and editing, you know, spending time with the poem and like trimming it down, getting down to the bone, like you say. So yeah, that's thank you for sharing that. I mean, we hope to use this platform as well to share this information, Raphael, you know, because unfortunately, poetry is not out there really. There aren't enough workshops, like the access issue is still a thing. So I mean, we're hoping to use this platform to be able to, you know, share this knowledge so that the quality of our work grows, because we're excited. We love South African poetry, you know. And speaking of which, my brother, do you mind reading us another poem?
Yes, I was about to ask for one. Yeah.
Yeah, because I also wanted to, like, you know, when you prepare to read that one, just talk a little about the form, because I know you're interested in form, like in form. Okay, but please go ahead.
So, do you want me to read the poem first, and then maybe we have the discussion on form, or vice versa?
Maybe let's read the poem first, and then we, you know, and then we discuss it after.
All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to read, as I say, I brought new ones, relatively new ones. This one was published in New Contrast. And I'm reading it because I've been invited to be part of McGregor, the festival in the Cape in November. And I've been invited by a poet that is organizing a group of poets that have been published in New Contrast. So we don't know yet if they're going to accept our proposal or not, but just in case, you know, if I go there, I will read this poem that is published in a spring 2021 issue of New Contrast. It's called The Two Fellow Performers, The Two Fellow Performers. And there is an epigraph from Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley that says, I met a traveler from an antique land. A Saturday morning, orange and open-armed with sunbeams. I'm reading poetry at a posh retirement home. The wrought iron gate spreads apart. I drive lower than necessary to hear pebble crunching along the tree-lined gravel avenue. On the right, elders stroll on a garden. On the left, a duck leads 6 ducklings through a water lily maze. A nurse from another century welcomes me, tells me to follow her to the tea room where I will do my reading. At the center of it, a Steinway & Sons concert grand, couth, shiny, regal. A white shirt, a black tailcoat, a black bow tie, black socks, and black undies neatly folded over an high chair. Black polished shoes underneath it. A disrobed, raw-boned man is playing a Chopin nocturne. His bag-like skin spilling from his waist. His arms saggy, his hair sparse, thin. His fingers greyhound swift. A composer once, they tell me later. The nurse brings me a cup of tea, no snigger, no stare of disbelief. I ask, sister, what the hell? She explains he only plays if naked, tells me not to worry, to just adhere to the house traditions. A lady dressed in violet walks in over the notes reciting Ozymandias. She treads the path for a bunch of guests reaching for the seats. Her voice sends a shudder through me. An opera singer once, they tell me later. When the ritual is completed, they make a move together. He dresses up. She hands him the clothes unhurried. Holding hands, they join the season lot. I finish my tea, draft this, and subvert the set I had prepared for my reading. I kick off with Shelley's Music When Soft Voices Die and Lovecraft's Nemesis. Then I switch to my own stuff. The Two Fellow Performers nod. My fate in beauty and destiny growing heftier with each verse I read. This is kind of based on a it is kind of based on a true story in the sense that I did a reading in a retirement house and there was this naked man playing the piano. So I'm like, I have to write about it. I made some stuff up to make up the poem, but you know, it was inspired by some of these things that happen when you do readings in all these different spaces.
Did the naked man was it? I mean, it was a distraction. I can think, yeah.
I mean, after all, I loved it. You know, if that was his way of keeping himself young and inspired, you know, well, so be it. You know, nobody had a problem with that, and neither did I. So, you know, it was something to write about, I think.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's what I enjoy about your poetry, Raphael, is that you know, it's honest and you're using a very simple language. And then you just like play around with the images, and I quite enjoy that authenticity, that your voice is you know.
Thank you.
And I suppose it comes from also reading, like you said, it comes from reading a whole range so that you can find a voice. We had just read a poem, Raphael, and we're talking about the language, the plain language, and actually the the reflection of the society. You know, you talk about from a real life like experience, which is, it might sound simple, but obviously there's depth to that. There's a lot of social commentary in that piece. Yeah. Can you give us the title again? You said it's called?
This one is called The Two Fellow Performers.
The Two Fellow Performers.
Yeah, and so far it's been published only in New Contrast. You know, maybe it will appear in my next collection if there will be one. But yeah, you can find it on New Contrast for now.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, Wes?
Yeah, I'm just something here real quick. But yeah, Raphael, like we were just saying offline. You say when hold on, sorry. Here we go. Yeah, just like we were talking offline, before the break. Just to the listeners as well, you know, on this platform, we're also very interested to talk and to find out how artists are adapting to the new reality, to this post-pandemic world, how they adapt to the digital space. Because it's very good data for ourselves. As you guys know, like we're setting up a company, a tech startup. We're doing the app where we will be broadcasting this type of work and just offering an alternative platform, but strictly just for art and for artists. So my brother, let me just lead you in there. So what I've noticed in this post-pandemic world is how artists' subject matter has changed, and this is across the board, so musicians, everybody really. So the subject matter, not dramatically, but it has changed. Some people have also become a bit more spiritual, some a bit more radical, and so forth and so forth. You know, as a writer, you know, most artists, when I asked them, they said they didn't really mind, you know, being in isolated because we work like that, so it's nothing new to everybody. But with that said, it still did change a lot. You know, this whole pandemic did change a lot. How did it affect you, and how are you interacting with the digital world, man? How, because you've got a pretty active Facebook page, so yeah, let's just take it from here.
Interesting question that makes me reflect on this. You know, where are we at after the pandemic? You know, revolution in a way, because it's really changed our lives. You know, and I don't think it's ever going to completely go back to where it was before. You know, it was a big shift. So personally, I didn't really like the isolation and the fact that we were not allowed to meet physically with other people for such a long time. But, you know, it became a necessity for many reasons. Personally, as a poet, I mean, the best moment for me is when I can share something, you know, on a stage and engage with my friends or with an audience in general. You know, that's the best, the moment that I really treasure more, that most inspires me, etc. So I miss that a lot, right? Well, I think, you know, we all did at different degrees. But, you know, obviously during that time we started to do things online. We started to do Zoom events, you know, and I must say I was quite busy. You know, I got invitations and stuff. And, you know, I started to look at what were the positive aspects of the digital space. Number one for me was that the digital space really brought out who the writers were, because the gimmicks don't work on Zoom. So, you know, you were able, well, I mean, that's clear. It came out quite clear that people who were like very flamboyant on stage and could, you know, occupy that space with power, they had to readapt. So in the long term, during this time, you know, you could see who were the ones who had substantial writing to bring forward, you know, in these digital platforms. And number two, which for me is good, you know, I always strive to not only to write better myself, but my dream is to be in a community where we all continuously, you know, try to be better writers, which, to be honest, doesn't happen all the time, right? Yeah. In the public, in the performance spaces in South Africa. So that was a positive thing. And the other positive thing is that you could reach, you know, audiences that you wouldn't reach, you know, in a live event. And so even after we started to do live events as well, my first one was at Black Labone in the center of Pretoria, an amazing space, you know, in the heart of Pretoria, in the middle of buildings, DJ set, like stage, and you know, very, very passionate crowd. So it was amazing. That was my first, you know, going back to a live event. So it energized me a lot. And but I also continue to do online, you know, online readings or online sessions like this one, because I think, as I say, I could now reach people that I wouldn't have reached without the digital space. When I launched my book, I launched it twice. And because it is published in Italy, one time we launched it for the Italian public, and the second time we launched it for the South Africa or the English-speaking, you know, world. And both time we did it online, and it was, both time it was amazing. You know, I could, you know, invite poets. One wasn't staying in the Mauritius, another one was in Cape Town. Filippo was staying in Joburg. I was staying in Pretoria. My translator was staying in Bologna in Italy. I mean, imagine if I had to do this live, we would never have a budget to do that, right? So you can get the best out of the digital space, which is limiting in many ways, but it can also be, you know, it can also have its own practical advantages. And so, yeah, I think I will keep using it.
That's a very interesting question. Thanks for that. Siza, you want to say?
Yeah. No, I wanted to say actually, because you know, I really miss poetry readings without like being like poetry readings being a show, you know.
Have you done any after the, you know, pandemic sort of was kind of relaxed? The pandemic, sorry, that the COVID protocols were relaxed. Have you done like live readings?
Yes, we actually host greenhouse sessions here in Kimberley. So we've created a space ourselves, you know, and yeah, it's been pretty amazing. Because I miss those sessions, you know, where you know you're just a writer, you're hearing out other people's writings. It's not like you are judged harshly
yes
all the time. Oh, you don't in whatever. Yeah, so I miss those actually.
I was missing it a lot myself. Yeah.
Hey?
No, I say I was missing it a lot myself during the lockdown and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Just to add on to a point we're making there, Raphael, about the fact that you could grow your audience, which I think is a very interesting point, because that's definitely something I've noticed. And that audience is actually quite huge. And in many ways, I think, you know, actually maybe still in a few months' time, an artist, a poet can actually fill up, can get 50,000 people, 10,000 at least between, and I think realistically about 10, 20,000 people. Not easy, but it's definitely possible. And that's a rugby stadium, that's a cricket stadium, that's a sports stadium. And I think that's really exciting. So I also enjoy, like Siza was saying, like we have our own we call them the greenhouse sessions, where we actually have these intimate curated crowds. You know, like just enjoy the human, like we're not human, but like the people experience. Because like, yeah, and I think it's great. It's like we really miss that. Like I miss it, man. Yeah. Like honestly, and just the energy. I mean, I love a lot of people in a room. Like even that, like, oh, you know, you don't get that anymore. And now if you smell another person, like, oh shit, it's COVID. So yeah, there's little nuances like that, which is really magic. But yeah, man, I think it's really interesting that there's the opportunity to grow and try to talk about
and just the collaborations, you know. You know, poetry with music is also a beautiful collaboration. I mean, I know you were also part of the project that Maisha did. What was it called again? That collection.
Oh, to breathe into another voice, the Jazz Poetry Collection, the Jazz Poetry Anthology. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that. That was very cool.
It was a cool project. You were part of it,
Raphael. Yeah, I have a poem in there called "At the Jazz Club," because you know Maisha obviously was the jazz queen even before they started giving her a radio program, which was something, you know, simply amazing. just listening to Maisha's jazz voice was already enough to fill my evening, you know. But then her knowledge of jazz music and her passion for jazz music and her passion for jazz poetry, you know, and plus she was hosting the sessions at the Dan Orbit in Braamfontein with jazz musicians. So obviously we were there from day one with her, and you know, I like jazz music, and I happen to have written a couple of what we can call jazz poems, and you know, Maisha liked one or two, I'm not sure actually, but I mean, I ended up in the anthology, and I think it's a groundbreaking anthology because it's, I think, the first one ever of jazz South African poetry. We know obviously that in the past South Africa have had great poets who have engaged with jazz, number one being Kerapetse Khositsile, but so it wasn't a new thing for the history of the country, but it was a unique moment to put together different voices in a single space, in a single anthology. So I mean, I will always be grateful to Maisha for that opportunity, and we miss her a lot. We miss her a lot.
No,
That's what I wanted to say. Like, oh my God, I just missed her. I remember the Josie House of Poetry as well that
you remember Siza those times. Yeah.
Yeah, at the Freedom Station.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad you also just, you know, remembering her spirits. May she continue to rest in peace. We've been losing a lot of poets, you know. So
she has left a mark, you know.
Yeah, she did.
Raphael, thank you.
This was colossal.
I mean, personally, my relationship with Maisha went even beyond poetry, you know. I can spend, you know, a whole session now telling you stories about me, you know, visiting her in Yeovil and just hanging around with her in her house. She was just a special person, you know. Apart from being a great poet and a friend, everything, she was special, and she will always be.
Oh, and her voice. Yeah.
I'm having goosebumps, but you know, just talking about her.
Oh, me too. My mood went somewhere else, but so much love for her, to her, and you know.
Yeah.
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 Ooh, sorry, just God.
Well, now I know I'm also very emotional, but let's also let's
read some poetry.
I remember that, you know, you showed me the book that I gave you, and it's yours now. It's a gift. I remember we exchanged. You gave me a book of Ben Okri, and I gave you Diana's book, you know. And now I was in Cape Town in May this year, and I was with Diana. And before I went there, I'm like, bring a copy of your book, because I lent it to someone who never returned it. So I want another copy. So now we both have one, Siza. So we are cool. We are both blessed. We are both blessed with the gift from another giant, you know, of South African poetry.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. We give thanks. And just on that note, maybe can you read us another poem?
Let me read. Maybe we can. Why don't you read the haiku? Do you have it, the one that we wrote together? Because I was going to read maybe a haiku or two, because I want to talk about this project that I'm busy with. You want me? Let me read one first.
Okay.
So I'm gonna read this. This haiku is the first I published. I only published in a journal called Mamba, the Journal of African Haiku, because I believe in this thing of, you know, supporting and promoting and exploring this space where this form, the haiku, is used in the African context. So I'm gonna read this one, the first one. It says, Black Mamba, coiled in sugarcane field, sight glistening. Now, this one, so the journal is called the Mamba, right? I read the first issue of the journal, and I was totally, you know, blown away. I'm like, these are African poets telling African stories with this Japanese form, and these poems are beautiful. So I was so inspired that I tried and wrote my first African haiku, right? And the editor, maybe I'll talk about him later, he happened to like it. And this poem, this haiku that I just wrote, ended up to being the opening poem of the second issue, an issue that features even Wallace Soyinka, right? So it was, and since then I've been, writing more, published like 6 or 7 in the Mamba, but all like African centered haiku, because, well, yeah, let me leave it there, and then maybe you can read yours, and maybe we can continue the conversation.
Okay, for sure.
You have it.
You have the book?
I do
Okay.
have it. I have it. Oh, you want me to read mine first? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought you. Okay.
Must you first find it?
No, man. Okay. Okay. So, I don't know, Raphael. Shall
All right.
we?
Okay, let me read another one, and then maybe.
I'm not sure. It's a haiku, and it's not easy to write when I West, because a haiku has got like this form. You have to have syllable 575, and you have to. I'm a bit conscious of, but I'll read it. But please go on first.
Should I read a second one?
Yes. Please do.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna read another Black Mamba one.
Okay.
Broken eggshells, black mambas sneak out from a hole. So I wrote what is called as a Black Mamba trilogy. There are three Black Mamba poems, 3 Black Mamba haiku published in that journal. Now, let's talk about haiku. Like, it seems like a very simple form to approach, because it's 3 lines. There are certain characteristics that are not that difficult to use, certain elements of the form that are not too difficult to use. I'm not going to go into the technicalities, but and then there is also this false actually belief, sorry Siza to say that it has to be 575, which it can be, because that's how the original haiku works in the Japanese language, although they are not even syllables, but they use the 575. But it is common knowledge in the English speaking world among English writers of haiku that English writers of haiku don't follow that scheme, right? There are other elements that make the haiku. So what makes it difficult, extremely difficult to write, is that haiku is not just what you see when you read it. It has, it's a type of poetry that you have to go back to fully grasp all the different like layers of it, right?
Yeah.
So when you try to do that and create a story in 3 lines that is not just the plain story that you read, but it has to be metaphorical, it has to have other layers, it becomes quite complex. For instance, the great masters of haiku, those Japanese pioneers, I read that there were some of them that they only wrote maybe 4 or 5 haiku in their own life. They would write one every 10 years. That's how difficult it was for them to say, okay, I've reached the level where this is now a haiku that is ready. So I'm not that extreme, but it is a form that requires a lot of time.
And I think practice, because if you think of it, like it's really just narrowing everything you need to say in 3 lines, and and it's difficult as it is to trim down a poem. Poetry is not easy to write, because getting to the point of it, it's just it's a beautiful art anyway. So I'd rather not read that one.
Okay.
Like I'm really interested in form, because also, like we were talking about music now, like currently, like with me, I'm interested in form that is created by music, you know, that is natural. And I don't know, I'm just exploring that. I never really cared much about, oh, this is a sonnet, this is like that stuff really didn't matter, but I appreciate the work it goes into it. Which leads me to the next question, Raphael. Like, what do you think the young poet really needs to know about writing good poetry? You know, because I find that there's a very thin line. Also, I don't know. It's a bit frustrating at some point because there's a lot of self-publishing as well. I feel like sometimes people feel like I can just be a poet tomorrow, which is fine. I'm not dismissing that, but just for the sake of the art itself of writing poetry, what can the young writer know?
I mean, it's a difficult question, because if you ask me personally, I mean, I would say there's nothing that a young person, let's not even say poet, that a young person needs to hear from an old fart like me. They have to find their own way, you know. It's good that they explore, you know, things in their own way, and they found their own language, and they found their own tools to tell their stories, and which they do, which is fantastic, you know. That's why I'm, you know, probably I'm the old poet that is more present than anyone, at least in Johannesburg and Pretoria, in the youth spaces, because I enjoy being there. You know, I like to see how they express themselves, and I really respect and treasure the spaces that they have created, right? So yeah. You know, I don't want to be prescriptive and say, you know, in order to write good poetry, they have to do A, B, and C, because it's not my job, right? What I can do is to share, you know, what I've learned through my journey, because, you know, perhaps I've been there for a bit longer, and I can maybe say, you know, if this is what you have chosen and you want to be a poet, right? Let's say a poet, okay? It's fine that you take care of the performative aspects of poetry, because poetry cannot be separated by performance. You know, the two things go together necessarily. But if you want to be a poet, then you also have to be a writer, to be a good performer and be able to create something that works on a stage. It's fine, but remember that you are limiting yourself to that space. If you want to be an all-around poet, you have to be able to create something that can be relevant and you know, solid, even outside the performance space, right? So my advice is, you know, maybe write something that is specific for the stage, and if you want to, you know, excel in a festival or win a slam, you know, you will write for that specific purpose, but don't limit yourself to that if you want to call yourself a poet, because
I think that resonates across almost every creative genre of practice, and I totally agree with you there, 100%, man. Yeah, Siza, you want to say something?
And my suggestion is always the same: read,
yeah.
because the more you read.
Yeah, Wes, because I wanted to say that, like, I feel like we are ready, you know, this writing space sometimes, I mean, we need readers, like Raphael is rightfully saying, so that we get criticism and we engage each other more. And I mean, we have reviews, you know, in the academic space. It's very difficult to even find work on our own people, you know, to reference as a point to look up to and learn from. So yeah, I'm excited.
Also, I mean, for me, let's not even blame the academics, because, to be honest, that's not the space where the change is gonna come from. You know, we know how conservative South African academia is. I mean, obviously with exceptions, but in general, that's not where the change is gonna come from. So what I notice is that we don't engage with each other enough. If you look at the past generations, the Natnakaza and you know, the Kantemba and the Lewis and Nkosi, they did read each other's work. They wrote on each other's works, and including yeah, so that's something that is missing in our community, and you know, it's something that I've been trying to also, you know, push. Last year, I co-published with Katleho Shoro and Vuzumuzi Pakati. We published a book called The Constant Reader, which was only reviews of poetry collection by South African poets or poetry shows done by South African poets or CD poetry. So it was a way of engaging with our peers.
Yeah.
Which we don't do enough.
Which we don't do enough, for sure. And I mean,
I think. So go ahead, Siza.
Okay, no, because I wanted to say I'm mentioning that, Raphael, because you know, I'm also in the academic space, and I think yes, we should use that space actually to, you know, to push the work. Because if you're not a writer of poetry, at least you can criticize it and appreciate and buy it, and like it becomes part of your lifestyle, you know. And that's why I'm saying this is such an exciting time, even with this. With the Lexcia podcast space where we share information honestly, you know, our experiences, and we are building each other. But yeah, I really appreciate your work, man. We celebrate ourselves here. I keep on saying, so we're celebrating you, Raphael, today. We give
Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. I think I was gonna add on say some of the things, Cesar, like on this platform, as you're saying, like with artists not engaging. I just want to add, like I've noticed that the digital space is actually the most accessible one where you can reach and engage artists, because we all tethered to our devices constantly anyway. I've also noticed that I actually want to bring something up that's like, so I was gonna say, I do the fact that artists don't always interact, that's actually also across all the genres as well. It is a bit concerning, but it's also something that's been going on since I've started out as well. I had to always get, even as a visual artist, for somebody to engage my work, I had to go to them, I had to go to a space. Nobody really came towards to me. So it is a conflict within our industry, but I do believe that this digital space does break that. And on this platform, man, like that's what we're trying to do, man. We're trying to get the writers or the artists like enough time so you can talk your heart out, man, and you can talk, you can read. I think it's very important. And yeah, man, I think, anything I'm
no,
gonna
and
say,
thanks for creating these spaces, because another thing of the digital space is that it gets recorded, so it's there, you know, it's not lost, it doesn't get lost, it's a sort of archiving our times. So, you know, thanks for the amazing work, and I agree with you, we must use it as much as possible and in the best possible way.
Yeah, and this work it exists. Like you can go check any of the past 87 episodes. Everybody is there. All the movement shakers are there. The musicians are there. The writers, the visual artists, talking their art out, man. And it's a beautiful, just for me as a host, just to be engaged in that. It's incredible. It's incredible. And it also gives rise to a lot of ideas, and that's what I love, man. Because usually I'm so wired after each recording. Like the brain is like, I'm wired, man. I was like, fuck, man. Like I've got, oh shit, like I must do this. And I
that's good. That's good.
Do this, and like I love it. I love it. It really keeps the soul. Man, I just love it. I just enjoy it.
Thank you guys. I mean, as I say, it's particularly rewarding and inspiring for me to be with guys like you. I mean, because you have a significant place in my own journey. So thank you for having me.
That's also like thanks for that, Raphael, man. Like that's also cool, man. What I also love about the art journey is that, like, you don't see everybody all the time, but when you do connect, and it's real, it's genuine, and it's meaningful. And like that's just what it's all about, man. That's just like is the thing of the haiku. I think that was really fascinating. I really enjoyed that. I like where you broke it down. I actually didn't know that takes like 10 years. I found haikus actually quite abstract. I would read it like, okay.
Well,
but I understand, like now you're using like the process. I'm like, wow, okay, sure, I get it. It's quite intense. It's for the real reader, the real poet. Yeah, it was
I mean, I started writing like seriously haiku maybe 7 years ago. And if you look at it, I've published like 6 or 7. It means one a year, one per year, you know, and which means that 90% of the other haiku that I've written were rubbish that are in my dustbin now.
You know
So
how I feel about reading that one?
Sorry?
You know, you understand how I feel about not reading.
But no, don't worry about that. No, you know, it takes time, Siza. It takes time, you know. So, and obvious, I'm not even saying my haiku are that good. But why I was sharing them is because something interesting happened a few days ago. I was contacted by a Russian poet that came across my haiku, and he's busy translating haiku from different parts of the world into Russian. So it's like, okay, send me your I think he read 1 or 2 and he says send me the other ones, and I'm like, okay, look, I published 6. I can't send you more than that. Tell me what you want to do with them. Maybe you'll choose 1 or 2. And then I sent them to him and he liked them all. So they are probably going to be translated into Russian, which is
That's
something, you know, it's
That's
crazy.
Really cool.
It's like
really cool to talk about
it's a triangle, like it's Japan, South Africa, Russia. It's interesting.
Very interesting.
I just added another layer to that. It's actually very political. Actually,
I love this. I love this. You know, kind of the idea that poetry transcends boundaries. I strongly believe in that. So when things like this happen, it strengthens this idea of mine that we write to transcend boundaries, all type of boundaries.
So, Raphael, we were actually wrapping up on your current on your project with the Russians, interpreting the work, which is a fantastic thing, and many congratulations for that. I've actually never worked, or I've actually never met anybody from Russia. So that's one part of the world I'd definitely like to collaborate with. You know, I'm a big Trotsky fan. You know, so a big fan of actually Russian culture and literature and so forth. So yeah, man, could we just wrap up?
So yes, it asked me to submit the haiku that I thought could, like, you know, be my best works, and I sent him 6 haiku, and he liked them all. Positive feedback, and he says he wants to include all of them in this anthology that he's curating, and he sent me the Russian translation, which obviously was very beautiful to look at, because, you know, they have this beautiful alphabet. Unfortunately, I can't. That's Cyrillic, but unfortunately I can't speak Russian. But it's amazing to see how what you know, comes out of just exploring literally and reading other people's work. You never know where, and also to publish in different spaces, you never know what's gonna happen next. You know, who would have ever thought that, you know, me publishing some haiku in a journal published in Ghana would have ended up on the desktop of a Russian poet, you know. So that's why I like to read. You know, it's what we were saying before. The more you read, the more you know about this art form, the more you know about how other people are exploring it around the world, and the more you can grow.
Yeah.
So, you know, and opportunities also might come up, like this one that you never even thought of. And it's just the beauty also of being part of this global community of poets.
Yeah, and I mean, Raphael, I really think that poetry is a language on its own. Like before the break, you were saying that, you know, one of its beauties that it transcends all borders, you know, it is a feeling and all of that. And, you know, just before we recorded the session, we were talking, actually, Raphael was reminding us about the 10th anniversary of the Marikana Massacre, you know, where, you know, our Black brothers were killed by the police in the Maracana mines. You know, this was in 2012. About 34 died, you know, and it's like a repetition of history, you know, like we always see this. It was 76 the other time. It's always something, you know. There's massacre, and I think just to honor, you know, our brothers and because poetry also can be used as a tool to remember, as a memory bank. In, you know, we cannot forget. We cannot forget. So my brother, if you can close us off with a poem for Maracana, and before that, actually, or after it, I don't know. This session was very emotional on many levels. Yeah, I would still like to know how to get a hold of you and stuff, but maybe we can do the poetry and just end with everything else.
And you're asking me to read one of the most emotional poems.
The most emotional. Yeah, I think it's quite fitting,
you know,
actually.
Because yeah, I mean, my approach, I try not to be rhetorical about political issues. So, I'm not the kind of poet that like looks at a political issue and say, I need to write about this. As Siza was saying before, I rather include my social commentary, political commentary in a different story. But this one, was so urgent that it was one of those poems that came to me. I don't know if you understand what I'm talking about. Occasionally, there are poems that just flow out.
Yeah.
Because they are somewhere deep into your subconscious, and they need to come out. And this was definitely one of them. One of those poems. Again, I'm sure you're familiar with the process that they come out and you hardly have to edit them. They come out already made, ready, so to speak. This one was one of the very few. It was inspired by this picture, which I'm sure we all know, of the kids walking to school next to the dead body of the miner. You remember, it was all over the newspaper.
Yeah.
And it's called Walking to School. In Marikana, I've seen Black children staring at their fathers' lifeless bodies on their way to school. Stale blood clots under their perfectly polished shoes. At school, all the teachers were in their place. Kosato did not call no general strike. What for? The English teacher was crying. The math teacher was drunk as usual. The history teacher spoke about the beauty of the new constitution. The geography teacher spoke about the richness of South African soil. In the NIMEX, the platinum future shot up to unprecedented levels. Still, most kids at lunch break had no food in their scaffolding. With empty stomachs, they all sang Nkosi Sikelele Africa, then went back home. Their father corpses were still there, just a little colder. Yeah,
that
was my immediate response to, I mean, there's not even much, to say, much more to say about it. We all remember where we were when we heard, one of those moments that exactly where you were, what you were doing when you heard about it, and you will never forget, and the impact that it had on all of us, and now it's been 10 years, and and workers are still killed, and workers are still underpaid, and the violence is still here, so
reparations, and over very few people brought to justice, and one of the guys is our president. And it's my brother. Just to reiterate what Siza said, this has been an incredibly emotional. We touched on some really, and it was beautiful. I think there's actually a lot of beauty in that. I don't mind becoming emotional if it comes from the soul, it comes from the heart, and it has a voice, and it has a meaning and a purpose. So many thanks, man, and I think this was definitely one of the longest recordings we've had to date. But I didn't even feel like that because I just think there was so much to unpack. And like many, my brother, I know you also a very busy man, like with all your projects, all the best for that. Like you say, you are you are a South African poet, which means you're part of us, man. And so thanks for flying the flag all over. Like in my personal space, I always think that the specific South African creative is the dopest in the world, just because we are forced to multitask and do everything all the time. And we do it to perfection. And some of us are so good we don't even know it. And yeah, we'd like to offer this platform to talk about that, man. And also just rest in peace, Aisha Jenkins. You know, I actually just remembered a few stories and a few things of her as well. I remember smoking some very strong weed, some really strong shit in the place once. And like I was like, it was difficult to get up from the chair, and I consider myself a smoker.
she was old school in all possible way, and I love that.
Yeah,
I love
like
that.
so yeah, Siza, in closing, my sister.
Yeah, guys, let's do forget. We are grateful for the space and time, my brother, you know, for sharing, for being so generous today, and sharing your processes and your memories and your journeys. So much big up to you and so much love to you. We wish you all the best, as Wesley said. And yeah, guys, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on these conversations because
YouTube,
support.
Spotify, everywhere.
Yeah, we want to engage, and please follow our brother Raphael. Can you tell us like your social media platforms where people
can they get
engage
hold of
with you?
Well, I'm an old guy, so I only have Facebook, and you know I've been back to open Instagram and Twitter and TikTok, but you know maybe one day. But you know we old people use Facebook. I don't even have a website, so reach out on Facebook. I'm there to you know to engage and yeah. But maybe one day I'll explore other
Get it. No, thanks, guys, and thank you for tuning in, and thank you for the love, you guys. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you so guys. Thank you so much, guys.
And
I'll be touching when the episode goes up live. Take care, my brother. Sleep well, and Siza will talk.
Much love.
One love. One love.